Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of the Scratch the Track podcast, presented by the Dude and Grim Show, co-produced by Mr. Ivy ESD. I'm the Dude.
And I'm Grim. And today we're talking about Led Zeppelin. You notice I didn't say anything, dude, and that's because this album is, although it is typically referred to as Led Zeppelin IV and or Zoso.
For those of you who can count.
It is untitled.
Untitled.
And that was a very deliberate and interesting choice by the band. And I think maybe that's the first thing to talk about, which I think is interesting because as we talk, because they received lukewarm
reviews, reception.
Yeah, of Led Zeppelin III, which
has a number.
I don't really understand that one because that's an awesome album. Why don't you check it?
It's a banger.
Check out our podcast on that one after you go ahead and do your thing.
Like, subscribe, and comment below.
It's funny. That is a very interesting and deliberate choice. Some people called it career suicide. But they did it, and it was absolutely not career suicide. It was like taking your career and making it better, but then putting part of it in fucking carbonite and freezing it because it was going to be awesome forever.
And
just keep going. Yeah, and just keep going.
Until it got saved. But, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. It's an interesting choice. And,
it is a choice, as Chuck would say.
Yeah, and
there's a choice.
I think there's people, people have done like untitled songs. They're like, oh, I don't want to have a name for the album. Even, we recently did the Fiona Apple album Title.
Yeah. And
she did not want a title for her album, but she felt, she signed this record deal and she felt that it was a title wave. So she's like, oh,
and that
title.
Seems like something you wouldn't want to challenge with your first record in the deal.
Probably
Maybe
not.
See how that one goes.
Yeah.
And,
At least make it first.
So with them, I mean, they've had 3 successful, even though number 3 may have gotten mixed reviews.
It still sold pretty well, I imagine.
Yeah, and I would say history would say that those people who criticized it that heavily were morons because it's continued to be a great album. It didn't get worse over time.
No,
we can say.
Yeah, it didn't.
So, interesting choice, but it was not career suicide. And I think it is still their best-selling album ever, if I'm not mistaken. I couldn't tell you what place it is or how many copies, but it's probably one of those albums that sits up there with Dark Side of the Moon of like the best-selling albums ever.
Totally. And titles also include, we got four symbols, the 4th album, Zoso, and Untitled. And there's also one, and I thought it was Ruins, but they just call it, I don't know, is this Runs? Runes. Runes.
Not ruins.
Yeah, right. Runes.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. So is that a British thing? I don't know.
Maybe. I always refer to it as 4.
It's 4. It's 4. It's easy. Mm-hmm. I like that. I'm good with it. But it is, it's probably their best selling. I think, we were talking about this the other day. I would say there's 4 songs on each side. You'll hear guaranteed every day on classic radio. You will hear 5 of those songs. Radio. You'll hear 5 of those songs. You'll hear, Stairway, Going to California, Misty Mountain Hop, Rock and Roll, and Black Dog every day. Like I would say Battle of Evermore, 4 Sticks, and When the Levee Breaks are a little fringy.
That would be on the XM radio station called Deep Cuts.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's more of a deep cut thing. But man, so this is released November 8th, 1971. Black Dog was the first single, Rock and Roll the second single. At this point, they had put together a string. Like the first 3 albums, okay, maybe 3 wasn't received as well, maybe didn't sell as well.
They still had a trend going.
They're still pretty good, still pretty popular.
Yeah.
At that point, the Beatles had broken up. The Stones, I forget. What were they putting out? It
would have been either the one with
Exile.
No, Exile, I think
Sticky Fingers.
72 between those
Sticky
two.
Fingers and Exile. Okay. And then when was Dark Side?
72.
72. So this is, okay. So this is...
But it placed very well in history. Let's just put it at that.
Yeah. And man, it's one of those albums I hadn't listened to for a kind of a long time. I got into when I was a little younger.
Dude, I absolutely feel that, and I have the same sort of relationship with Zeppelin. I mean, in high school, I would have no doubt said they were probably
the best band in the world,
or my favorite one. To me, it was like I always had this thing where, like, okay, the Beatles are best. That's not even arguable. But Led Zeppelin was my favorite for sure.
Yeah, that's
at that time, and I still really hold a special place for Led Zeppelin, but I can't say that I listen to them as consistently as I did at that age. But there's something to be said about when you're discovering a band.
Yeah. All right. Here's a question: what's the first Led Zeppelin CD you bought? Do you remember?
I honestly think it was that BBC session.
The BBC session
came out, and that's something I want to talk about. And I guess it doesn't necessarily warrant talking about it during the song.
Tracks. Yeah.
But on that BBC Sessions CD, they did, I think, the best version. I think they did this live sometimes too, because I don't think Out on the Tiles from Led Zeppelin III was a very regularly played song.
It wasn't a single.
In that BBC Sessions, they do a version of that where they have that Out on the Tiles intro, but it goes into Black Dog.
Yes.
And dude, it's so awesome. So good.
Yeah.
So good. I wish they would have done it on the album, but I think it was actually kind of better that they didn't. It was just because that would have been it would have been abrasive to start it. Yeah. The way that it does start with kind of like that.
That's a little tougher to do maybe. I think, and I could be 100% wrong on this, I think that was the first time they had played those songs.
Oh, I believe
for a live audience, because I know
so. There's a version of Stairway on
Stairway, Going to California, and Black Dog. I think Going to California. Well, I know it's Black Dog and Stairway for sure. I don't know if there's, and then maybe Going to California. I don't know if there's any other ones.
Yeah, I don't really think there is, but it was enough of a window as to what's coming, where I'm sure people were pretty excited.
Yeah, and there's probably like a 25 minute of Whole Lot of Love or Dazed and Confused. So.
Oh yeah, Dazed and Confused. They get out the bow.
I mean, that's cool, but I'm good.
I know.
Like, can I have maybe like a 6-minute version of that in like 4 more songs? Just a thought. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Jimmy, I appreciate your creativity.
But I think that at that time, that was just one of those things that was really cool and just set them apart.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that was not the first time.
A lot of bands can't do that.
Yes, and that was probably not the first time that a bow had been used to play the guitar, although many people think of Jimmy Page as the innovator of that. You may know a little song called Making Time by The Creation, where they also use a bow, if you know, at the end of it. They do that at the end. So I don't know if they were the first one, but either way, this was the first thing that, to me, I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't know about The Creation, but I knew about Led Zeppelin, and you saw that, and you were like,
yeah.
I thought to myself, I need a violin bow, but
yeah, I mean, I think,
didn't.
I think the best use of not even a violin bow, but just like a violin in general, is in the movie Spinal Tap, when you see Nigel Tufnell during his guitar solo play the bow on his electric guitar.
No, the violin. Doesn't he use the violin?
Yeah, the violin just as a whole. It's not even the bow. It's just like, hey, man, I'm doing this. And and he realized, you see the moment where he's like, this just doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
And he's got to tune the peg. Just like he's got an ear, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's, what do they call it? Not pitch perfect, because that's a movie, perfect pitch. So it's the other way around.
There's actually a really funny thing along those same lines. There's this, I've seen it on YouTube, but it's a video about like this guy who was like the most amazing drummer ever.
You're amazing, dude.
What they said the reason is because they mic'd his drum stool like in with the set. It's so funny.
That's sweet, man. That's bad.
Yeah, that was the thing that set him apart, and everyone was like, wow, it was like the innovation that no one saw coming. Like, forget the bow. use the violin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like cut out the middleman. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Go to the source.
So, dude, before we get, I feel like the recording process takes you right in the song. So the cover. The cover and I guess the symbols. I don't want to go into what the symbols mean for each member and all that, because that's sort of a interesting and maybe a dense conversation. But
yeah.
I do think it's interesting that they chose to represent themselves with these symbols, which kind of stuck, even though they never showed up again, I don't think, in their subsequent albums.
That's interesting.
It did become synonymous with the band.
Yeah, I have like T-shirts and things and whatnot with that.
I like that they also gave a symbol to Miss Sandy Denny, who shows up on the Battle of Evermore. Now, her symbol is 3 triangles that connect. And it's funny because if you color those triangles in black and put a circle around them, it's basically the Fallout Shelter symbol, which if I was going to have a symbol, that would be a pretty awesome one.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and, we'll talk about this a little more. I mean, as far as the recording goes, they recorded a lot of Led Zeppelin III at Headley Grange. They had considered using Mick Jagger's home Stargroves, but here's the interesting: they decided that it was too expensive, so instead they went to Headley Grange and used the Rolling Stones mobile studio.
Yeah,
right. And they got Andy Johns, who had at least, I don't know if he had produced, but he hadn't produced. But
Andy Johns or Glenn Johns?
No, Andy Johns.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Who had engineered Sticky Fingers. So Sticky Fingers just got... Okay, yeah, so I have that. So Sticky Fingers had just got done. Andy Johns engineered that. And that's who they got to engineer when they went to Headley Grange and did that.
Interesting.
So my understanding with Andy Johns, my understanding is they, they went to Headley Grange, as so many bands do. It's a relaxed atmosphere. They go to there to record. It's like, oh, we just get up and we can eat,
make
sleep,
breakfast,
record,
and put on the tapes.
Yeah, I can have tea and crumpets, right? Mm-hmm. So many bands have done this, and we've done a lot of episodes on this. But Stones did this with Exile. They kind of
had to, but they did. But they did.
That's the name of the album. But Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic. STP did it with Purple. It's something a lot of bands have done.
Radiohead did it with OK Computer.
Radiohead did it with OK Computer and Kid A. Like, they've done it multiple times.
Really? I thought they were straight up in the studio for that.
No. They did a lot of stuff with Kid A.
Ooh.
Yeah. I mean, we did an episode on it. I'm sure you remember. But
it's been a long and interesting life, dude, and it's been a long and interesting podcast.
Yes.
And I can't remember them all, but maybe you would. And if you don't, please go ahead and do the following, so that you might know things that we forgot, because you can listen to the episodes,
and then you can judge us quietly or loudly in the comment section.
Yeah, and just hear the things that we can't remember, because you do enough of these episodes and there's sometimes you're like, that questionable thing that we talked about beforehand, did that make the episode? Or
who's to say? Yeah. But it's been 3 years and over 200 episodes, so you're welcome.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of bands have done that, and I mean, dude, you just think about that, and man, some great bands and some great albums.
But I get it, though, because I think that, not like I have all this experience, but my gut would tell me that being in a proper studio also adds pressure and tension, because now it's not like they didn't have to pay for what they were doing there, but it's like when you're there, that every second is costing you X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
And it's like, you go into something that with a bunch of songs that are flushed out and the band wants to basically rip through them live and put in overdubs, that's one thing. Yeah. But if you kind of are in the process of experimentation, maybe not the most cost-effective
Go budget
method.
friendly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's cool. And they said that they could do a lot of different takes and experimentation with how things sounded. But one thing that I love that John Paul Jones said, he was like, yeah, there wasn't a bar or anything for leisure activities around. So we just had to do what we were doing.
John Bonham would have freaking ripped apart.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the thing. It's like, we just did an episode, the Rolling Stones Beggar's Banquet, and they talked about Brian Jones like not showing up and stuff. Here's the thing: if you're like living in the same house, then
you're already there.
It's like, dude, you got no excuse. Just walk downstairs.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. They'll come pound on your door.
Just do that.
Yeah.
So, so with this at Headley Grange, they did the basic tracks, and then they did all the overdubs and everything at Island Studios. Once everything was kind of done there, Jimmy Page took the multi-track tapes to LA to Sunset Sound
to mix them.
Yeah, he was there. So here's the deal: he went there. I mean, this is the thing. This is what this is 71. Yeah. So whatever. That took 10 days. Then he takes the tapes. He's probably flying commercial. He gets on an airplane with the tapes, and you fly all the way back to, I imagine, London or wherever he's living. You have it's mixed. You play them for the band, and they're like, we don't like them.
Yeah, why would you go all the way to LA? Now, the only positive...
There's fucking Abbey Road Studios and all these places, Olympic and
Olympic,
right?
Island, There's probably a large and distinguished list of possibilities that you could have mixed it at. But one thing I think that is interesting, though, is they didn't like them. They didn't like the mixes. However, the good part to come out of that was that they actually renamed Going to California, because it was originally called A Guide to California.
Yeah. But you're a fucking park ranger.
And it actually, if the song was done and the lyrics were in, it doesn't make sense that it would be called A Guide to California, because it clearly says Going to California with an aching in my heart in the song. So if little else... And I'm sure at the time, one might have been like, wow, that was a waste of money. Now, in retrospect, probably cost-benefit analysis, the benefit outweighed the cost there, because I'm sure the royalties they received from classic rock radio, I don't know, in the last decade would have paid for the trip like 5 times over.
Yeah, I mean...
Because it's played every day, like you said.
When you're a band of that stature, you have money to waste. You really do. I mean, they had their own private jet. So they were good.
I would actually, and I think that's probably got to be a fun thing to think of ways to waste it.
Yeah.
You're like, I actually want to mix this one in Antarctica.
Yeah. Because it's just going to sound better.
Yeah. So put the Rolling Stones mobile studio on a ship, and we're going to the Falcon Islands.
Yeah. We're going to fly down to Ushuaia, Argentina, and then we're going to get on a
rent a Land Rover, and
it's going to be fine. Yeah. So they did end up, obviously remixing the album, and apparently they liked it, and they wanted to release it, but then it was delayed again because the record company didn't want to release the cover of the album. They didn't want to release an album with no title. They debated whether they should release it as a double album
or a single. Double would have been a mistake.
A set of EPs, because they also had some other songs.
Yeah,
they had Down by the Seaside, Night Flight, Boogie with Stu, and an early version of No Quarter. So
interesting. So I didn't read the No Quarter. I knew the other ones, but
so they could have. I mean, it's 8 songs. Let's say that pushes it up to 12. We're like, hey, let's fool around with like a double album. Maybe we add a couple more.
That's not
or
enough
something.
for a double. That's a side and a half.
You need a little more.
Best.
I mean, here's the thing though. You got Stairway, 6 or 7 minutes. You got
When the Levee Breaks,
and No Quarter is long.
Yeah. Okay. Still not enough for double. But anyways.
You know what? Throw in a fucking instrumental.
Yeah. There you go. But I think they made the right call on keeping it a single album. Yeah, and I think that's an interesting call. Now, a lot of albums that come out today are double albums merely because they were created in a time where the popular format was CD.
Yeah.
And so...
You got to split things up, blah,
once
blah, blah.
Once you get to a point...
45s obviously sound better. He loves 45s. So...
I don't love 12-inch 45s.
Next episode.
Yeah.
All right, so starting with track number 1, side 1, we have Black Dog.
Yeah, I did. The intro is interesting. I still like the Out on the Tiles one better, but I do think that's a kind of a cool way to start an album, just with like a weird sound like that. Now, I didn't know this, but I think that it's cool that it was written about a dog that was like hanging around the place when they were recording that. It's really, I mean, let's face it, dude, it's basically ripped off blues lyrics like a lot of Led Zeppelin is. I love Led Zeppelin, but man,
Bobby.
Yeah,
Bobby.
It's surprising because if people would have been in control of those estates, they would have got sued.
That
straight
man,
up.
that's a really good point, and probably a even better point for another episode. But man, you could do a deep dive on that, because that's the thing.
It's not even that deep. It's just all their lyrics.
We'll get to Stairway in a little bit.
Whole lot of love.
But there's there's a lot of songs, and you were telling me earlier, what was it, Tom Petty or someone, like estates are suing artists and people. And what's the ginger-headed dude? Does that? Oh, I hope I can say that.
Ed Sheeran.
Ed Sheeran.
Is just
and he's going to quit music if he's found guilty. Which
is that what he said?
Yeah.
That actually, like, damn, that takes a lot of balls.
It takes a lot of balls.
And he must have made a shitload of money. Because,
question: would the world be a better place? Would music be a better place?
You know, I don't listen to him, so I'm not going to say one way or another, but I don't care for his music.
Right.
No offense to him, it's just not my thing. But
should that be happening? Also, should that be? I mean, this is again for another episode.
I haven't heard the two examples, but I can tell you from the Tom Petty and the Tom Petty one against Sam Smith. I was I was on Sam Smith's side. I was like, dude, I'm sorry. That is not enough.
Yeah.
Now, we'll get into something as we progress through the songs here, like with Stairway, where, dude, that riff is pretty hard to ignore. And it's complicated enough where it's not like just two chords. It's very distinct.
There's a progression.
Now, it does not resolve in the same way, but let's get through this.
Let's finish with Black Dog. All right.
So Black Dog, I love the thickness of it. I love how it sounds like there's probably like fucking 8 guitars playing that riff in different octaves.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
dude. I mean, this was, it's one of those songs you hear on classic rock radio. Mm-hmm. It's certainly, especially at a younger age, in my younger days, it's one of the songs that definitely grabbed me. And I was like, man, I dig this song. Like, I hadn't heard anything like it before.
Not my favorite nowadays.
No.
Not a spoiler alert either, just saying.
But a good way to start this album. It's pretty, again, it's pretty unique.
Now, this is interesting. There's some guitar riffs in the outro.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I read, and this is more common nowadays because you have all these like tube emulators and things that you can go into before you would go into. Now, the solos at the end of this song were recorded by plugging the guitar directly into the fucking mixer, which you just didn't do back then. You recorded the amp. You did not record. You did not put a guitar directly into the mixer. That is and they have a different sound. You'll probably notice, but that is a very interesting technique that when I read,
don't sweat the technique. Yeah,
I did not expect Eric B. and Rakim.
Yeah, interesting.
Isn't
man.
it them?
I don't know. Who cares?
Okay.
Jam session's waiting to start. Yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty trippy, man.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's something that's sort of lost in music today. Back then, you had all these like, hey, let's try this instead of recording the amp.
Because you got digital emulation of nearly anything you want.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, like we said in the episode on I don't even know what anymore, but dude,
there's so many episodes.
There's an actual there are many Pro Tools plugins
for the room, right?
That are specifically meant to emulate certain studios' big rooms. Ocean Way was the one.
This is what this, I mean, that is amazing. This is what this room sounds. I mean, here's the thing. What's going to happen is this podcast is going to like blow up someday, and people are going to create a plugin that is going to sound just like the room we're sitting in right now.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
This one's better than my basement.
It's solid. I mean, we have carpet on the floor, and it's thicker. I mean, it's not.
And you got a lot of nice lights. I mean, I just turn on an overhead and dim it a little bit. It's not what I'd call like science. Like a director of photography wouldn't find my
DOP.
DP wouldn't find my situation to be ideal. Anyways,
DP has a whole different connotation.
Rock and roll.
So, all right, rock. You said it. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll collaboration with Mr. Ian Stewart,
who did a lot of piano work for a band you might know of, the Rolling Stones.
Who?
Yeah, him and Nicky Hopkins,
the Rolling Stones
were some of the biggest. I think Ian Stewart's actually written in the credits for Exile on Main Street, I believe.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, rock and roll, again, it's another song that you will hear on classic rock radio every single day, even multiple times. And again, keeping the energy up. You start with Black Dog, a very recognizable song, and then you move, dude, right into rock and roll. And it's in your face, consistent throughout and everything. Mm-hmm.
Ian Stewart's piano part is awesome. I mean, it kind of makes it, in my opinion. It's what...
Been a long time since the rock and roll.
It takes it from what people would call a basic bitch rock and roll song to it adds something, because of course Led Zeppelin would just come at it with electric guitar, bass, singing, and drums, but it
goes from bitch to bitch in.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So,
yeah, right.
Now, next we will go, and this is a favorite of ours, and I imagine it is not your scratch. I would hope it's not, unless you've changed. But we've all
everybody changes, but no, dude, I didn't turn into a total asshole.
Yeah,
no, it's not my fucking scratch,
dude, the Battle of Evermore. It is. This is a departure. This sound in this song for them. I mean, I know Led Zeppelin III was, more acoustic based.
Yeah.
And this obviously is different than Black Dog and Rock and Roll.
It kind of is more Led Zeppelin 3 now that you say that. That's interesting. Now, did you put a tarp up? Because I'm going to blow your mind. But, like, dude, this song, in my opinion, is like acoustic Star Wars. Like, the imagery and stuff with the lyrics is just kind of,
I can see that. I would say it's acoustic like Lord of the Rings, although we'll get to Misty Mountain Hop, but
he's also already talked about Lord of the Rings multiple times, but he probably would again.
It's I mean I think people, for some reason, I think people take Lord of the Rings and Led Zeppelin and put sort of his lyrical imagery kind of
because Ramble On is like about the Hobbit or some shit.
Misty Mountain Hop, the title comes from the Hobbit.
Yes. But I think Ramble On is actually
as well.
Like direct references to it, because he says
the Steps of Mordor, blah,
in the evil world.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Steps of Mordor, I met a girl so pale, right? Is that what it says? Something like that.
Yeah, albino.
Guano. And so I mean, I'm a huge fan of Battle of Evermore. It's interesting because before this, had they had anyone else sing on a Led Zeppelin
I don't think so. And
even female vocals or background vocals?
Maybe background vocals, but I'm glad you brought that up because
this is a duet.
Ian Stewart's contribution is different. He played piano on a track, and it was great. But yeah, this is Robert Plant and her really going. It's like a conversation.
Throw it on your plow and, dude, just throw it on your plow and hoe, right? rest not to lock your homes.
Oh, that's what he says. I always thought he said get back to the blowhole, like from a whale.
Oh,
I just,
that's not it.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think, maybe I don't have 100% right, but that's definitely
I think you're closer.
It probably.
I do think you're closer. But it was actually written about a book that Plant was reading about the Scottish Independence Wars. Now that makes more sense, but some of his imagery is so kind of like spacey that's where I went to. So number 4 on number
4
Untouched.
So many times.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever heard of this song before, obviously.
Yeah.
And that is Stairway to Heaven.
I mean, it's interesting. It kind of says a lot when this song is so popular that it makes such a cameo in Wayne's World, where they actually have a sign in the guitar shop that says "No Stairway
Tonight."
And it's funny because in the movie, I didn't realize this at the time because I was so young and I wasn't yet that familiar with Zeppelin. Nothing he played before they stopped him was even reminiscent of Stairway. I mean, it was like...
If it was the most garbage version you have ever heard.
Yeah, it's like they took the opening riff from Stairway and they were like, all right, let's shake this up in a bag and see what comes out.
Yeah. Denied. It's not good. Denied. So this is, I mean, a song that...
about.
It's interesting. Yeah, there's lots to talk about here. One of the most famous popular songs of all time.
Is this the first time that you heard John Paul Jones playing a Rhodes? Might have been.
It's possible.
Might have been. Definitely the Mellotron. I do not think they had put Mellotron in anything at this point. And if so, it was very subtle. But like, dude, he plays the flute setting just so beautifully in the intro. And I think the flute setting is maybe the best one that there is, other than the violins, which Bowie used on like Space Oddity, the violins and strings. Dude. But that flute setting, I mean, that's the Beatles' Strawberry Fields.
Dude, it's
like it's gorgeous.
Sorry, man. When I hear, like, not that I know anything about music, but I feel like I know more about music now than I did. Right?
Sure. Because you read about it, mate.
Exactly. You know, when I listened to this in my younger days again, I was like, man, those flutes are really good, right? I mean, because it's what you think it is. Yeah. But man, John Paul Jones, first of all, I mean, every band has a member that I feel like
is underappreciated
and sort of the glue.
Oh yeah, and that's him.
And I think that's totally him. But man, I mean, it's hard. You got John Bonham, Jimmy Page,
I know,
Robert Plant,
but he is so versatile because all those other guys do one thing. But like, and I'm glad you brought up, and I've sung the praises of the Mellotron in a lot of episodes. But when you were like, yeah, those flutes sound good, that's because the instrument functioned by actually taking real recordings of a flute, and when you hit a key, a head ran down a reel of tape. That was an actual recording of a flute. So that was cool.
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they did it really well. Now, we would be remiss if we did not discuss that there is sort of a copyright. There was. I think it has been resolved.
With the band Spirit.
Yes, and I think Led Zeppelin has been...
cleared of any charges. Now, I have to say, we've talked about these before. In a lot of ways, I can say, I don't think you can copyright a chord progression. I don't think that's fair. Now,
that's the thing, though. At what point do you start? At what point do you stop?
These are all good questions. These are all good questions. But in this one, I feel like Taurus should have maybe got something. But here's another question. And as you brought it up when we were talking about the BBC Sessions episode, when did they start playing this live? Versus when that Taurus thing was released.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, and that goes to an argument too. Like we didn't do the research. We're not going to retry the case, but it's like, when did they release that track? When did Jimmy Page write the track? When was it first put down, recorded live, all that stuff? I mean,
but even played live, because that's important, because if that happened before the Spirit song ever got released, I think it's just the idea.
Yeah.
Shout out to you, Chris Rifty, that thoughts are independent from their source.
And he's not watching.
And he didn't even come up with that quote, but it's still applicable here. So it's tough to me because the basic descending riff is uncanny the same. It's the same chords, it's the same notes. I mean, hell, it almost sounds like recorded in the same, but it's very similar.
Right.
But here's where it changes. The Spirit song Taurus does not resolve the same, and it certainly doesn't go where Stairway goes.
Yeah.
And let's face it, I'm pretty sure that Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin did not take a lot of royalties that they would have got because it was such a good track.
Yeah. Well, and there's to me, in my mind, there's a big gray area. Yeah. It's like, okay, I mean, dude, we all listen to music, we all hear songs, and then there's certain people who hear songs. You're a musician, you hear a song, you listen to music, maybe it gets stuck in your head. Like, even we did an episode on the Flaming Lips with, is it Fight Test or Yoshimi? I forget which one it is. Yeah.
That Cat Stevens
with Cat
song.
Stevens.
I forgot about that.
Are the Flaming Lips
it's Fight
copycats?
Test.
It's Fight Test. And even Wayne Coyne said, like, hey, maybe this happened like subliminally. Like, maybe like I didn't know it. I don't know. Like,
listen to the Flaming Lips catalog. I'm pretty sure ripping off Cat Stevens wasn't like their mantra.
No.
Right.
But people listen to certain things, and
there's only so many chords and notes you even have for guys, especially in Western music.
And then you play one or
a 12-tone scale. I mean,
you play a couple, and you're like, oh, that sounds really nice. Yeah. Let's see where I can go from there.
And the resolutions are fairly common.
So,
tell us what you think below, because I'm honestly interested in that. I think there's a lot of varying opinions on what constitute these lawsuits and what's reasonable, and I think some things just aren't. The Taurus thing, that's a tough one for me, because it's like you could sing the lyrics along with it and it would work. It's that close.
Yeah.
It's not even like Pearls to Swine and A Taste of Honey by the Beatles. Shout out JG.
And ... MRE.
Yeah. But anyways, let's flip to side 2 before this could be another hour.
Yes, exactly. And we don't have that kind of time because we have 10 minutes. So
that's what I thought.
We're going to go
Misty
Mountain Hop. Yep.
So definitely not the first time you heard John Paul Jones play the Rhodes, but probably the best. It's just
at this point.
Yeah, and what I love is that chromatic ascension during the vocals, because they keep going in the same rhythm, but sometimes it's like not the same as it was before.
Yeah. Yeah. It jumps around. It jumps. So I really this is an interesting song, because I feel like there's parts of it that are very robotic and systematic, like when it does that. Yeah. But then it breaks away from that and then it comes back.
Yeah.
And
because I'm packing my bags for the Misty Mountain.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
And this again, kind of the title comes from The Hobbit, but
it's about like students and police facing off in like a drug possession thing, which it's funny because there's so many lyrics. And I remember a buddy of mine, Mike Boxer, he used to always talk about like that he thought it was indicating that they were set up, because he said that his friends would all stop by, indicating like the cops were tipped off, which I always thought was kind of funny.
Right. Yeah. What does he say? Something. Have some fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also like the thing of like,
ooh,
like getting above it and knowing that as long as you don't have the drugs, whether you're in your system, you don't need to necessarily get in trouble, because I know that it's only a state of mind. Dude, I always like that.
It's so funny, man, because, dude, I went to this party I was in San Francisco, and, like, I'm not into doing illegal stuff. But I was with this dude, in a group of people, and he was all like the cops showed up at this like unannounced party, and he was like, "Oh, we got to get out of here and stuff." Because
you're like, this isn't high school.
I was like, oh, okay, and he was like, "Yeah, oh, we got to get out. He was like, well, yeah, well, you don't have on you whatever I have. And I was like, oh, yeah. I guess I'm not really worried about that, bro.
Yeah.
Have fun putting that up your whatever orifice. Anyways, next track, 4 Sticks.
Didn't know this, but it came from Bonham's drumming pattern, which involved playing it with 4 sticks.
Dude,
my favorite song on the album.
I know,
bar none, dude.
It's interesting because you said that for years. It's been your favorite song, and for me, like growing up and loving this album, it was my least favorite song, and I was always like, "What the fuck?" Like,
is that shit?
Yeah, and. It took me a while, it took me time to come around to really appreciate this song because, if you look at it, it's placed around.
I know.
All these, the greatest song of all time, these radio hits. Even if you flip over on side 2, which I didn't have this on vinyl, but CD, dude, it's in between Going to California, Misty Mountain Hop, Stairway, When the Levee Breaks. And I'm like, dude, it's the obvious easy skip. If you're not into like that, I just didn't know it.
I hear so much Stone Temple Pilots influence in this song because that
when you pointed that out, like I was like, "Whoa, well, yeah, I certainly do." And they have been having.
You know what else it influenced by something you might know is there was a song called "Spiritual Divide" by Moore, but the way those drums were so that was a big influence in how that was done. Yeah. And one thing I like about it is that I think it's the first time in Led Zeppelin where you hear them play a synthesizer. And as we talked about earlier, the synth can go very much between cheesy and cool, and they keep it real nice.
I was going to say, like, you got to be careful. Don't, you toe that line. You better
don't bleep this up.
Fall on the side.
Yeah, right. Going to California.
Which, at this point now...
Change in direction.
Here's the thing. Led Zeppelin III has been... people talk about it's the acoustic album.
This is the one most...
But they don't have a song on Led Zeppelin III. I feel like this acoustic.
Yeah, because it stays acoustic throughout the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, I don't know what John Bonham's doing here.
Wait.
Yeah,
there's the breath just to start the song, and I don't know if people appreciate that, especially if they listen to it on the radio.
Yeah, right. Because they'd probably someone would be like, "Oh, the monster truck rallies at wherever this weekend." Yeah. One thing I always liked is, I think he does this in the BBC sessions, but I think there's probably more than one instance of it live where he's like telling myself it's not as hard as it seems, and he goes, "It's hard." It's like hard. But he says it. He doesn't sing it. He's just like, "It's hard."
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that as they played it and the song evolved, and you've talked about this too.
With Stairway
in previous
episodes.
Dude,
when you watch Stairway on The Song Remains the Same, he does this. Yeah, he does something a little different during that descending kind of an ascending part on the 12 string, and it's phenomenal.
It fits so perfect.
It should have been in the recording, but
so actually going back to Stairway real quick, we had talked about this. We were like, oh man, how many times did he like play that solo and everything? So he played that solo 3 times, and they chose the best one.
And interestingly enough, and this is a real guitar nerd thing, but he played it on a Fender Telecaster, which is a guitar he used to use in the early, like in Led Zeppelin.
Gifted by Jeff Beck.
Yeah, and it's all like painted up, I think, and shit. And he played that a lot, I know, on Led Zeppelin 1. But after that, you almost saw him exclusively play either a Gibson Les Paul or the double neck Gibson ES whatever, but it's basically an SG that's so
he played it well. Last one, we got 3.
When the Levee Breaks.
A cover song
blues cover,
by Memphis Minnie and Kansas Joe McCoy in 1929.
But dude, they made it so much their own in a way that I don't think they did with even the other blues songs. And a lot of it was the recording of those drums, which were done in like the foyer of this house, and the mics were placed a couple floors up. And then you run that through a compressor or a limiter, I think they said, but just
a limiter, yeah.
Yeah, and just dude,
the sound of this, and
it's thick. It sounds like the rain that just doesn't
so
stop.
Fucking heavy, man. It's like, dude, dude, it sounds like when the levee breaks.
Yes, it does.
And it's fucking great. So, Grim, I scratched last, you scratch now.
Oh, man. You are probably, and you might even give me a you know what, but dude, I would actually scratch Black Dog because I just like the rawness of it when they played it live. Okay. And I love the Out on the Tiles intro. And that's...
Well, I would only...
You could... Rock and Roll would be an interesting way to start the album. Because it just comes right in and it's going full force from the moment one. You know?
Man. All right. You just fucked my head up. Because I was going to be like, oh, well, how are you going to start the album then? And I'll tell you what, man.
Not a bad way, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're Led Zeppelin and you want to give people the middle finger after you were like, Led Zeppelin 3 kind of sucks.
Yeah, you were just like, zip.
Oh, you didn't like the acoustic? Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. But rock and roll could be definitely a way to do that. So I can't disagree. I would, if we can go into overtime and all this stuff. Initially, I was going to scratch rock and roll. And I will. And we won't go into overtime. But yeah, I mean, that's very interesting. I feel like that is such a great response to all the critics, which, I mean, Metacritic gave it a 10 out of 10.
A lot of people gave it as much you could. Of course, Pitchfork didn't, but that's because it wasn't an early 2000s indie band. So,
let's go.
I guess we got to wrap it up, though, because I feel like we're going to run out of time here. But I appreciate your scratch, and I get it. I definitely do, especially when you think about the radio.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We got Led Zeppelin 3, House of the Holy, Physical Graffiti. If you like Led Zeppelin, we got more scratches. Time to go. The Dude and Grim Show. Sort of co-produced by ABSD. Peace.
Scratch a Track is produced by The Dude and Grim. Additional music provided by Moore and the Tims. Copyright 2023. The Dude and Grim Show.